Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Now we are back again with second video of 2021 champions ranked. This time we're going to be taking a look at spots 9 to 16. So basically these are much more kind of middle of the road champions. Most important thing to remember, champions that made it already in this list are good or have a use or have a purpose. Especially, let's say, spot 13 and onwards. It was very, very tricky and hard to rank them past spot 13. Up until then, I was kind of a bit more certain. But as always, keep in mind that this is just my opinion. My opinion can change and evolve over time. Some champions, showcase themselves better and become relevant months or even years later. And some champions, fizzle out. There are a lot of champions that are, once were popular and are not anymore, or there are a lot of champions that have been extremely hyped and never really delivered. Either way, this is how I see the game. This is not meant to be some sort of law or rule. This is just my personal opinion, and it's perfectly fine if it does not match yours. I'm not trying to insult you, your beliefs, or your family. This is simply the way I think and the way I view the game right now. In month 2 or 3, my opinion might shift on some of these champions. In the first video, we ranked up 24th to 17th champions that are basically the worst champions of the year. The champions that did not deliver. And the one comment that I definitely wanted to mention once again is that with Craven, well, I know very little about him. That is where I see him currently. But also, he's the champion we as a community know least about because his arenas are just ongoing now. So it's very feasible that his rankings might change. However, when it comes to Psychoman, Super Scroll, Purgatory, Mango, Chavez, blah, 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 that's where I see them. Right, so let's jump to our beloved Aunt May and let's get this shindig started. So we're going to be starting with spot number 16. And in 16th place, I have placed Jabari Panther. Now, Jabari Panther has a lot of good qualities. And she can do a lot of damage once you get her ramped up. Now, my personal issues with Jabari Panther are that anything she does can be done significantly better by other skill champions. Therefore, she's kind of like a middle of a tier pack. And yes, in moderate to longer level fights where you can, ramp her up, get to the 10 charges, drop a special attack, everything goes fine. You can see some very beautiful bleeds, very beautiful numbers with her. But ultimately, she just didn't catch on. And I know she has her, redeeming qualities all in all. But as a champion, she does not seem to be all that impressive, at the very least to me. In my head, her most redeeming qualities are defensive purpose, because she can be somewhat annoying defender because of her pseudo stun immunity, or that basically cleanse mechanic being able to purify the stuns. All in all, I think she's a fine, solid champion. As I said at the start, I think every single champion on today's list already have some use or purpose. But we're starting with Jabari Panther just because I think her design and her abilities are relatively uninspired. And yeah, here we are. Here we are. If skill class wouldn't have been getting as many buffs, as many good buffs as it did, I'm sure more people would play Jabari Panther. But skill class quite jacked now and just doesn't let Jabari shine too much. Moving on to spot number 15 is AntiVenom. Now, AntiVenom is another champion who I can very easily see increase in value in future. He's one of the newer champions, therefore not too many people still have him. He has extremely vital synergy with Spider-Man 2099, who is currently, on his own hype train and rocket ship to the moon. And there are a lot of good things about AntiVenom. And again, I do think that his value might increase. However, currently, you just don't see him, you don't hear about him, and you don't really think of him as like the perfect counter for this, the perfect counter for that. Like, his immunities are quite good. Incinerate and poison immunities are very good to have, especially for a symbiote champion. And all in all, he does have very solid bunch of utility, access to plenty of debuffs that are, permanent. Therefore, abilities that shrug off debuffs quicker off or reduce their duration do not really affect him. And on top of it all, he can have a lot of damage. Now, the problem with AntiVenom is that you have to choose, which is always a very painful system when they implement, because very rarely a champion succeeds when you need to sacrifice your utility for damage or vice versa. And unfortunately, with AntiVenom, that is quite literally the case. You convert all of your utility debuffs into furies that, are not indefinite. And you can get a massive burst in damage, and he can do a lot of it, but then you lose majority of your utilities, minus like the immunities, basically. And I really don't like that. I wish that, it made that fury based on the amount of debuffs you have or something like that, so that you wouldn't have to get rid of them. Unfortunately, you do. And the second kind of downside to the champion is also that he's not really a casual questing champion. He's fairly slow in his damage ramp up, and that, unfortunately, I fear might make this guy lead a similar life than Iron Man Finty War. Iron Man Finty War, in reality, can have some of the highest damage output in the game in really long fights, because, he ramps up consistently, and you can just increase and increase and increase that plasma damage, and all in all, his damage output can be absolutely insane. It's just very slow to get started with him. And it's kind of similar here. You build up like level 1, level 3, or level 2, and then you get some. It's just not quite quick enough for him to be like popular go-to champion for like your standard daily operations in MCOC. So that is where I say AntiVenom. Again, very easily see him moving higher up the list and becoming more valued as he becomes more common, as he enters like the basic crystal pool and things like that. The way things are right now, not too sold on him personally. And spot number 14, I'm going to go with Icarus. And Icarus is another champion that is very, very new. I have limited amount of knowledge and experience with this guy. And if I am not necessarily able to talk about all of the amazing matchups that you can have with Icarus, I can 100% tell you that he's extremely enjoyable to use. He's very, very fun champion because he combines, getting a ton of debuffs, therefore basically having a rain of red numbers. Even though they don't do that much damage, they're still satisfying as such. And then you can have some very big special attacks. All in all, also the fact that, he does energy damage and is immune to Incinerate and Shock is also a very solid kind of like bunch of immunities, which, just adds to his overall value. But I think the best thing about him as a champion is the fact that he pretty much all the time has 70% increased combat power rate. That is a lot of power. That is a lot of extra power to be able to use very easily. And to me, he kind of reminds of alternative version of Hyperion. Whereas I do think Hyperion's power gain is definitely more powerful and better because you do not require to actually engage in combat. And with Hyperion, it's very useful that you often can slow play, just wait a bit, and you're going to get that power regardless. But in a practical kind of day-to-day playstyle way, you can definitely feel similarities to the fact that it always seems that a special attack is just there, easily available. And that obviously gets a lot of benefits because there are a ton of nodes that we see that rely on using special attacks, based on your hit counts or just, power shield nodes and just a bunch of stuff like that in general. So I do genuinely think that Icarus might have even better future in the contest. I do again think that it's just because he's very new, he's quite fresh, not too many people have him. We haven't seen him do insane amount of crazy things, but I also do not want to rank up champions like super high based on my suspicions if I haven't myself seen, experienced all the great things that they could potentially do. So we're going to put Icarus at spot number 14 with, again, kind of like very easily acceptable point of view where he could move up higher. And I do think that he probably will. He's also one of my most sought after champions, so I can't wait to get my hands on this guy. Right, and spot number 13, and this kind of like marks the entry point to like already really, really good champions that I know for a fact have plenty of use. Everything from spot number 13 and up, I think, has already proved themselves. And I can easily see why people want to rank those champions, want to use those champions, like those champions, recommend those champions. Top 3, top 4 champions, I think this year that came out are like broken, busted, and everything below that is just really good or really solid. They do not break the game. They have their limitations. They have their downsides, but they have their use and they have their purpose. In spot number 13, I'm currently going to place an Overseer. It actually kind of stings me a bit because I do have this guy at rank 3 and I do like him. There are plenty of things that I like about him. One of them is just the ability to inflict debuff every time opponent throws a special attack. That has come in handy much more than I initially thought it would. And it is genuinely helpful, even though those, like, ability reduction on special attack nodes aren't that helpful. I think the one biggest limiting factor of this guy is that in a standard matchup, in an average matchup, he's quite slow to get ramped up. Unless you are playing around his immunities, basically you need to give opponent like 5 bars of power, which is a ton before you kind of want to enter your like damage mode. And I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I think he's just a tad bit too slow. If you manage to capitalize on his immunities, he becomes significantly better because you can have pretty much infinite uptime of your cosmic mode. And that is a game changer because at that point you do a ton of guaranteed damage and you gain all of these extra abilities and he's just awesome. Problem is that in a standard matchup, he's just not quite quick enough. All in all, he does have plenty of subtle pieces of utility. I like the fact that he has Taunt on heavy attack. Taunt is extremely underrated ability. I like the fact that he's immune to Nullify. That is, super underrated. There aren't too many champions in the game that are immune to Nullify. He can also become immune to reverse controls, which is, again, one very, very rare thing. And in general, he just seems to be one of those champions that fit the bill. Whether because he's like, extra large, whether because he's poison immune, has access to a Fury buff, therefore can deal with like caustic temper nodes and stuff like that. Whether because he has that Nullify Fate Seal immunity, he can easily take on big Symbiote Supremes or Buffet nodes and stuff like that. I think appreciation for this champion is going to grow over time as well. And I could very easily see myself placing him higher in a week or 2 or a month. His popularity is also being helped by the fact that his prestige is extremely respectable and he gets ranked up because of that also. All in all, I do think that Overseer is a good champion. I think Overseer is a shit character and I never want to see another hipster maestro added to the contest. I don't care for the, design process behind him, whatever. I do, however, think that his ability kit is useful and is good to have access to. Right. So let's go back. Let's go back to the next one. And spot number 12. Now we are officially moving in the upper half. And we're going to go with Silver Centurion. Silver Centurion is another utility powerhouse. I see him getting more love, especially recently. Now, there are some downsides on using this guy and definitely some very, very bad matchups, especially with his lock-on mechanic. Because recently there are more and more fights where you can't necessarily always be aggressive or remain close to the opponent, and therefore you're kind of missing out on a whole bunch of, extra power and extra abilities. But if you just look at him by very, very basic standards, it's a tech champion that is immune to bleed and shock, as long as you have your armor above. He's a tech champion that does not crit. He's a tech champion that has access to shock and incinerate. And, that alone is quite useful. Then on top of that, he has that slow and heavy attack, which isn't too bad. He's one of the very few champions in the game that can inflict the passive shock debuffs, which also turned out to be extremely valuable, for instance, in 7.3, because they combined the must for shock with a double determination, which was quite cheeky. Has access to heal block, why not? And decent amounts of burst damage. So I do think he's a good character. He's unfortunately another one of those, he's MCOC character, whatever. And let's be honest, I think they pretty much picked the ugliest armor. But as an ability kit, I think he's very, very useful. I do think he kind of has to be duped. That's my personal thing that I'm waiting for. I'm waiting to dupe Silver Centurion before I kind of start investing in him. If my Silver Centurion had been duped, I would have possibly went with him over Guardian, maybe, because they're relatively similar. But either way, I do think he's a very good and useful champion. Therefore, he finds the way in spot number 12. Now, spot number 11, and I can already hear the rage and outrage and upset people and everything else. And in spot number 11, I'm just going to put Strife. You can say that it's because I'm not a fan of him. You can say that it's because I'm biased. Or you can just accept that that's the way I look at him. He has a bunch of useful abilities, but here's the problem. He, in my opinion, has one of the most finicky and annoying and troublesome ramp ups. He's also a champion that relies on synergies. And for majority of the fights, I'd rather use his synergy partners or just not have him tag along as well. His so-called trinity is with Strife, Cable, and APOC. Pretty much always want to use Cable or APOC instead. In like an average quest, again, he has one of the harshest ramp-up methods in the game. It's like taking Morningstar's ramp-up and exponentially making it more annoying by limiting your playstyle to level 1's heavy attacks and having to drop a level 3 once you charge up. A lot of people say like, oh, it's so much quicker and easier to ramp him up than Aegon, for instance. It's not quite true, is it though? Because with Aegon, you just need to play the game. You don't need to play in any special way. Take an Aegon, go into fight, hit the opponent, don't get hit, that's it. Aegon gets ramped. Yes, it might take longer, but as far as the fighting goes, you do not need to do one thing different or special. With Strife, throw a level 1, making sure opponent doesn't have a level 1. You start to phase, then make sure they dash in, land your heavy attack, gain some charges, rinse, repeat, build up to level 3, drop that level 3 again. It's just so annoying. I think he's a champion that had a lot of wind behind his sails when he arrived in contest. He's one of the biggest hype jobs in the history of MCOC, only comparable to Proxima and a handful of others. And I think he has largely fell down the map. I know for a fact there are people who like him. I know that for a fact there are people who use him, and you can, and I'm sure he can do plenty of good things for you. My biggest kind of judgment on Strife is, why would I bother? There's always a champion that you can use that does the same thing as good or better, but is easier to play and less annoying ramp up and less maintenance. And that's why I'm not a fan of the champion. Genuinely don't like his ramp up process at all, one bit. And I think trying to do that in a quest, especially if those fights are hard, is just unnecessary. But hey, if you like Strife, you like Strife. You know, we don't king shame here on this channel. My opinion, Strife is a perfectly average middle of the pack champion that can be used for a ton of stuff. I just think most of the people choose not to. Right, let's move on. Spot number 10 now. Top 10. Top 10. Top 10 is Penny. I kind of wanted to place her higher. She's a champion that immediately gained a lot of attention and not notoriety. Fact of the matter is, I think Penny's arguably the most annoying champion to fight against. Now, I'm not saying the hardest. I'm not saying, she's the best defender or anything like that. It's just, I think it's a very annoying process to fight against her. Well, see how to hit her, block like 20 times, disable her shield, and then you can do some damage, and you need to squeeze it in before that shield comes back on, and all that other stuff. It's just extremely frustrating to fight against her. Offensively, however, she's definitely no slouch either. She has solid power control. She has a lot of incinerate damage, and, auto block and immunities and access to passive heal block. So there's quite a lot going for her. The way I look at Penny, it's kind of maybe slightly like a budget warlock, maybe. But in general, I think she's a very good champion. I think there are very good reasons why some people absolutely love her and stand by her offensively. She definitely can put in a lot of work, but so can every single other champion above her on this list. So keep that in mind. I do think she's a good champion. And yeah, I have mine at rank 3 as well for reasons. But yes, here we are in spot number 10. We're looking at Penny. I also really like her synergies with Spider-Gwen, Miles Morales, and like a few other champs. Right. Spot number 9 might shock some of you guys. Spot number 9 is also maybe a slight speculation on my part. And it's Nimrod. Now, I also do think that Nimrod, being one of the newer champions, hasn't had quite the time to shine. But the deal with Nimrod is he's an absolute mutant destroyer. Now, he does have quite a lot of utility in his kit and a generic matchup, with his immunities. He also can, basically ignore armor breaks and you do energy damage instead of physical. And against mutants, your ability accuracy can be reduced, which can be, very useful. And then you have access to shock and energize and unstoppable. And you can regen. That regen isn't the greatest, but still you can. There's plenty of kit in Nimrod. I also do think that he's not the most impressive champion in an average fight. But that is not what a good champion makes. Not always, anyways. We have plenty of champions that are considered to be some of the best in game or elite champions that do very specific things extremely well. And as this game grows, ability to take care of problems the best becomes more and more important, because there are more variety of nodes and requirements and, class requirements and hashtags and champion requirements and things like that. And the more the game grows, the more important it is to be able to have access like specific ability sets. And when it comes to Nimrod, he absolutely destroys pretty much all the mutants. Just absolutely eradicates them. Has crazy amount of damage against mutants. He, has utility that shuts off their abilities plenty of times and is immune to a whole bunch of their stuff and just works perfectly. Now, I only have like 5-star Nimrod that I have yet to take to rank 5, but I'm doing that with purpose because I'm going to be really focusing on getting a 6-star Nimrod and probably giving him my 6-star Awakening gem and then trying to, and then getting him to rank 3. Because I do genuinely believe that Nimrod's popularity is going to increase significantly over time as he becomes more and more available, in a similar sense as perhaps Human Torch did. Because with Human Torch, initially, he didn't have the best reception, and then people were willing to admit that, he works great against Mystics, but we already have that champion, and, is that all that needed? But it turns out that, yeah, it's needed. And, it already makes for a very good champion. And even if Nimrod would be a champion that I would only want to use against mutant champions, I'd still want to have him. I'd still want to have access to this guy. Just every single time I'd see an annoying mutant champion, I could go and wreck it easily. And I think that is kind of like the more important thing, why Nimrod is as high as he is, why I do have a lot of faith in this champion, and why I think he is going to be a lot more used 6 months from now than he's right now. Because he's very rare, because he's not in the basic pool, because hardly anybody has him, because he didn't necessarily get the best presentation from, CCP with the biggest headlines. But in general, I do think the simple fact that he's one of the most effective, if not the most effective mutant killer, should pretty much be enough to already warrant his standing, his ranking, and the fact that he's an amazing champion. And that is it for today's video. So these are spots number 9 to 16. Again, I know that not everybody will agree, and that is fine. We all see game with different eyes. We have different needs. We play the game differently. Therefore, things that are important to me will not necessarily be as important to you, and so on and so forth. Point of these videos is not to tell you which champion is necessarily the best or the better, and I'm never wrong. The point of these videos is to help people think, or to help people understand the way I think, and perhaps engage in some discussion. Because I do know for a fact a lot of teams and alliances and chats like to discuss these lists. So either way, let me know about all of the listings here. Remember that absolutely nothing here is meant as disrespect to any given champion. I think in this video already, all champions pretty much have a purpose, have a use, have their own, fan following, and there are very good reasons to invest materials in every single one of these champions. Off to comment section. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'm going to catch you guys soon. See ya.
Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about